Year 8. This video is feedback for the whole class on the Henry VIII assessment that you have done this term. You have been assessed on two objectives, AO1, which is your knowledge of the past, in this case Henry VIII, and AO3, which is your ability to understand and use and analyse interpretations of the past. Section A was a knowledge quiz. The average score, the average mark in the class was 6.6 out of 10. And section B was some written questions. One was based on the content. Question 2 was based on the content also. And question 3 was based on the provenance of the interpretations. And what I'm going to do in this video is go through each section one by one and each question on the written part of the exam to explain how marks are awarded and show you some example answers. So, in the Socrative, the average mark was 6.6. So what I've done is I've picked out the 3 hardest questions to answer. The 3 questions that got the least correct answers. The first was question number 4. Question number 4, why did European explorers explore? It wasn't to extend democracy, because England wasn't a democracy at that point, so it's not B. This idea that people believed and wanted to prove the earth was flat is probably a bit of an exaggeration. And also, if you believed the world was flat and you were trying to prove it, you'd fall off the end of it. So I don't think explorers would want to do that. And then D, they wanted to discover new lands before Russia did. The idea of Russia and other countries in Europe competing for different parts of land across the world, that isn't happening. So the answer is A. They wanted to find a new route to India. India was almost seen as the gateway of trade between Europe and Asia. Then question number 6, which you can see at the bottom of this slide, in which year did Henry VIII become the King of England? It was 1509. His father, Henry VII, wins the Battle of Bosworth in 1485 and dies, meaning that Henry takes the throne in 1509. So the answer there is answer B. Then question number 9. You had to give 2 reasons for this, and you needed to get both of them to get the mark. A couple of people only gave one answer, so please make sure you always read the question fully and correctly. But the 2 that were correct are B and C. To say that Henry didn't agree with the Catholic beliefs of the monasteries is incorrect. Henry is a Catholic. Remember that in his younger years, the Pope names him Fide Defensor, defender of the faith. And although he changes the church and creates the Church of England, he doesn't really change much about the church. A lot of the religious changes happen when his son Edward comes to the throne. And it isn't D, because the monasteries weren't converted into palaces. Unfortunately, these beautiful buildings were just left to fall to ruins. And if you go and visit a monastery today, quite often all you will see is the shell of the building that once existed there. So the answer for question 9 is B and C. He needed money for his wars with France and Spain, and he also believed that some of the monks in the monastery weren't living spiritual lives. Question number 1 on section B asked you to read interpretation A and identify 2 things that it believes about Henry VIII. Well done to those people. I think everybody actually got 2 out of 2 in this question. Well done. It argues that number 1, Henry was a significant king, and number 4, Henry's rule contributed to the modernisation of Britain. Well done. The 2 things that are suggested are 1 and 4. Okay, question number 2. How does B differ from A? Explain your answer using the interpretations. So in this answer, you need to consider content, and there's no need for any own knowledge. You just need to identify the overall message of each one and then give me a quote from each one. So it's just content in this question. And I could have chosen a lot of answers here because there were so many people in the class that gave a really strong response and got 4 marks out of 4. And what I encourage you to do now we've moved from year 7 to year 8 is to move beyond the words good and bad and positive and negative. So what I've tried to do is to try and pick an answer that doesn't consider good, bad, positive and negative, and gives a real precise point of view and backs it up with 2 relevant quotes. So if you look here in this answer, the person who's answered this has said Henry was cruel and greedy. So they've not just said it was positive about him or it liked him. He was cruel and greedy. And then the quote, this was Henry through and through, a man of unstoppable greed. So it's here's what it thinks, and here's a quote that tells me what it thinks. And then it's the same for interpretation A. Henry modernised Britain, and then said, Henry rescued the English church from the cruelty of Rome. We are still living in the England of Henry VIII. So again, here's the opinion of the interpretation, and 2, in this case, effective quotes from it. So a really strong answer there. And then finally, this is the most difficult question on the whole assessment, because in the Socrative quiz, you either know the answer or you don't. And then sometimes if you're not sure, you can have a guess. And it's always good to risk it and take a guess when you're not sure on the Socrative quiz. Then we did really well, almost everybody getting full marks in the first question, and lots of people getting full marks in question 2. This was the most difficult question, question number 3, because you've got to look at the provenance of the 2 interpretations and also provide some knowledge as well. So lots of people who got 3 marks out of 4 is because you talked about provenance but forgot to add some knowledge as well. Now, the key thing for this question for me is I'm looking for the word fascinating for interpretation A, because that is what Alison Weir is looking for. When she writes a book, she is looking for individuals that fascinate her from the Tudor period. And for that reason, when you are fascinated by something, you are impressed by it. So it's more likely to focus on the positive achievements. Whereas interpretation B, it talks about them being imperfect. And it says there, interpretation B writes about people from the Tudor Stuart period, how they often create difficulties reigning. So this is a good point, for Hutton. The second interpretation, he's looking at monarchs as complex people. That was a key quote that lots of people mentioned, that kings and queens are complex. And then all I need now is some knowledge. And I can see that at the end. Henry changed the church because he wanted to divorce Catherine and marry Anne. So for lots of people, that was the difference between 3 and 4 marks, telling me a little bit of what you know about Henry. So you can see there about rescuing and strengthening the church was for his own selfish reasons, and we've got some knowledge there as well. So that's how to get 4 marks out of 4 in question number 3, which was the most difficult question. So what do you do now? What I would recommend that you do is look back over your answers and annotate them. So if you've received 4 marks out of 4 in this question, make sure that you're aware why. And if it's not clear from my marking, then you can add it yourself. What we're looking for in this question is 2 comments about provenance, 1 from each interpretation, and then some knowledge as well. So I think it's wise now to look back, particularly at questions 1, 2 and 3, and annotate your answers and explain how to gain the marks that you might have missed out on.